Story 1. The Passenger Who Knew Too Much. Daniel Crawford had been hauling cross-country freight for 29 years, and in all that time he'd maintained one absolute rule: never pick up hitchhikers. Not because he was callous or uncaring, but because the road had taught him that strangers carried risks he couldn't afford. But on a freezing February night in 2022, somewhere on Interstate 80 through Wyoming, Daniel's compassion overrode his caution, and he learned that some passengers carry knowledge that no living person should possess. The blizzard had started around 9 p.m., transforming the highway into a treacherous tunnel of swirling white. Visibility dropped to less than 50 feet, and the wind hammered Daniel's trailer with enough force to make him feel like he was wrestling the steering wheel rather than driving. He was hauling electronics from Sacramento to Chicago, running behind schedule because of the weather, and seriously considering finding a place to park and wait out the storm. That's when his headlights caught the figure standing on the shoulder. A man in a heavy coat, hood pulled up against the wind, arm extended with his thumb out. Daniel's first instinct was to pass by. His second instinct was guilt. In this weather, exposure could be fatal. He'd never forgive himself if he read about someone freezing to death on this stretch of highway after he'd driven past. Against every ounce of his better judgment, Daniel pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. The figure ran toward the passenger door and climbed in quickly, bringing a blast of freezing air and snow with him. "Thank you," the man said, his voice muffled by a scarf wrapped around his face. "I was beginning to think I'd die out there." "Where you headed?" Daniel asked, pulling back onto the highway carefully. "East," the man said simply. "As far as you're going." He pushed back his hood, revealing a pale face with dark eyes and features that were somehow difficult to focus on, like looking at someone through water. He appeared to be in his 40s, maybe 50s, with that ageless quality some people have. "My name is Thomas Webb. Daniel Crawford. I'm going all the way to Chicago if this weather lets me." "Perfect," Thomas said, settling into the passenger seat. "That's exactly where I need to be. What's the date today?" Daniel glanced at him, confused by the odd question. "February 18th, 2022. Thomas nodded slowly, like he was confirming something he'd suspected. "And you picked me up at mile marker 235, correct?" "Didn't notice the marker specifically, but that sounds about right. You okay? You're asking weird questions." "I'm fine," Thomas said, but there was something off about his tone. "Just trying to orient myself. Time gets confusing sometimes. Tell me, Daniel, do you believe in fate? In predetermined outcomes?" Daniel wasn't much for philosophical discussions, especially not during a blizzard, but the man seemed to need conversation, maybe to stay alert and ward off hypothermia. "I guess I believe we make our own choices. Why? Because in 3 miles at mile marker 238, there's going to be a jackknifed semi blocking both lanes. Black ice caused it. The driver is unhurt but shaken. If you continue at your current speed, you'll come around that curve ahead and won't be able to stop in time. You'll hit the trailer at approximately 47 miles per hour. The impact will be survivable for you, but your cargo will be totaled, and you'll spend 6 weeks recovering from a broken collarbone and 3 fractured ribs." Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. "What the hell are you talking about?" "I'm talking about what's going to happen in approximately 2 minutes and 40 seconds if you don't slow down right now. There's a jackknife truck ahead. I know because I've lived this night before. Multiple times. I'm stuck in a loop, Daniel, reliving the same stretch of highway, the same storm, and I keep trying to change outcomes. You're the first driver who's actually stopped to pick me up. Most drive past. They make it another 15 miles before a different accident claims them. Black ice, same storm system, 6 fatalities in a pileup. But you stopped. So now I'm going to try to save you from the accident ahead." Daniel wanted to laugh, to dismiss this as the ramblings of someone with hypothermia-induced confusion. But something about Thomas's certainty, The specific details made him ease off the accelerator. His speed dropped from 55 to 45, then to 35. "You're telling me you're living the same night over and over?" "Since 2019, Thomas said quietly. 3 years, subjectively much longer. I died on this highway on February 18th, 2019. My car went off the road in a storm exactly like this one, exactly at this location. I've been trapped here ever since, watching the same night repeat with different drivers, different outcomes, all ending in tragedy. I'm trying to save people, Daniel. It's all I can do." The curve appeared ahead, the highway bending to the right. Daniel navigated it slowly, and his heart nearly stopped when his headlights illuminated the scene Thomas had described. A jackknifed semi blocked both lanes, the trailer at a 45-degree angle, hazard lights flashing weakly through the snow. If Daniel had been traveling at his previous speed, he would have had no chance to stop. He brought his truck to a halt about 100 feet from the wreck, hands shaking on the wheel. "You knew. You actually knew that was there." "I told you I've lived this night dozens of times. I know every accident, every hazard, every decision point." The driver of that truck is named Marcus Peterson. He's 47 years old, has 3 children, and he's terrified right now because he thinks he's about to be hit by another vehicle that can't stop in time. "You need to radio this in. Get emergency services here before someone else comes around that curve too fast." Daniel grabbed his CB with trembling hands and reported the accident, giving the exact location and details. The dispatcher confirmed they'd send help. Daniel turned to Thomas, his mind reeling with questions, but before he could speak, Thomas continued. "In 30 minutes, if we stay here, a pickup truck is going to come around that curve at 65 miles per hour. The driver is drunk. He'll plow into your truck, and the chain reaction will kill 4 people, including you and Marcus. We need to move your truck to block the curve, hazards on, to force that pickup to slow down before he gets to the wreck. It's the only way to prevent those deaths." "How can you possibly know?" "Because I've watched it happen. I've stood on this highway and seen you die, Daniel. I've seen it 15 different ways, depending on the choices made. Please just trust me. We have 28 minutes now. Move your truck." Something in Thomas's eyes, a deep, ancient weariness, convinced Daniel. He repositioned his rig at an angle across both lanes about 200 yards before the curve, blocking the road, his hazard lights and high beams on. Then he got out with Thomas and set up emergency flares, creating a warning corridor that no driver could miss. They sat in Daniel's cab, heater running, waiting. Marcus Peterson had come over and they'd explained the situation to him. He was skeptical of Thomas's claims, but grateful for Daniel's slow approach that had prevented a collision. The 3 of them waited in tense silence. 29 minutes later, exactly as Thomas had predicted, headlights appeared through the snow. A pickup truck approaching fast, too fast. But the driver saw the flares, saw Daniel's truck blocking the road, and slammed on his brakes. The pickup skidded wildly, fishtailing, and came to rest sideways about 50 feet from Daniel's truck. The driver, clearly intoxicated based on his stumbling exit from the vehicle, started shouting incoherently before collapsing in the snow. "That's 4 lives saved," Thomas said quietly, "including yours." Emergency vehicles arrived within the hour. Highway patrol, ambulances, tow trucks. The drunk driver was arrested. Marcus's truck was cleared from the road. Daniel gave his statement to the police, explaining how he'd come upon the scene and taken precautions. He left out Thomas's predictions, knowing they'd sound insane. As the highway patrol officer walked away, Daniel turned to thank Thomas, but his passenger was gone. Simply vanished. The passenger seat was empty, the door still closed and locked from the inside. Daniel scrambled out of his truck, looking around frantically. "Thomas! Thomas Webb!" The highway patrol officer came back. "You okay, Mr. Crawford?" "The man who was with me. Did you see where he went?" "What man?" You've been alone in your cab every time I've looked." Daniel described Thomas, but the officer's expression grew concerned. "Sir, I think the stress of the situation might be getting to you. There's been no one else in your truck. I've had eyes on your vehicle since we arrived." After the road was cleared and Daniel was permitted to continue, he drove in a daze. He pulled into the next truck stop and used his phone to search for Thomas Webb, Wyoming Highway Death 2019. He found it, a news article about Thomas Andrew Webb, age 44, who died when his vehicle left the roadway on I-80 during a blizzard on February 18, 2019. The article included a photo. It was the same man who'd been sitting in Daniel's passenger seat. Daniel sat in the truck stop for 3 hours, drinking coffee, his hands still shaking. A dead man had hitchhiked in his truck. A ghost had saved his life by predicting an accident he'd witnessed in previous loops through the same night. It defied everything Daniel understood about reality. But the proof was undeniable. Thomas had known about the jackknife truck before they'd reached it. He'd known about the drunk driver down to the minute. He'd saved 4 lives, including Daniel's, by convincing a skeptical trucker to trust impossible knowledge. Daniel completed his delivery to Chicago, then took a week off. He researched everything he could find about ghosts, time loops, and hauntings connected to highways. He found scattered accounts of similar phenomena. Spirits of accident victims appearing to drivers, warning them of hazards, trying to prevent the tragedies they themselves had experienced. He also found something else. In the weeks following February 18, 2022, there were no fatal accidents reported on that stretch of I-80 in Wyoming. The pileup that Thomas had mentioned, the one that usually claimed 6 lives when drivers passed him by, never happened. Daniel's decision to stop had changed something, broken some pattern. Daniel Crawford still drives that route regularly. He always slows down near mile marker 235, always watches for hitchhikers, always remembers the pale man who knew too much. He's never seen Thomas Webb again, and he wonders if maybe, just maybe, by saving those 4 lives, Thomas had earned his release from the loop. Or maybe Thomas is still there, still living February 18th over and over, appearing to different drivers, trying to save people one warning at a time. Sometimes Daniel plays the radio on that stretch, and occasionally he'll hear static that sounds like a voice trying to break through, saying words he can almost understand. When that happens, he slows down, pays extra attention to the road ahead, and honors the memory of a dead man who spent years saving the living from joining him. And Daniel makes sure to pick up hitchhikers more often now, especially in bad weather, especially near that mile marker. Because he knows that sometimes the people standing on the shoulder aren't quite alive, but they're trying to help anyway, and refusing that help might cost lives that could have been saved. Story 2. The Way Station Outside of Time. Victoria Vicky Hammond had been hauling refrigerated goods across the western states for 36 years, long enough to know every way station, inspection point, and truck checkpoint from Seattle to San Diego. She prided herself on maintaining perfect logs, keeping her vehicle in top condition, and never having violations. So when she pulled into a way station on Highway 395 in Eastern California on the night of May 9, 2021, expecting a routine inspection, she had no reason to worry. But what she discovered inside that facility convinced her that some government installations exist in places where time and reality follow different rules. Vicky was hauling dairy products from Fresno to Reno, a straightforward overnight run she'd made hundreds of times. Highway 395 cut through the high desert and mountains of Eastern California, remote and beautiful, with scattered small towns and long stretches of emptiness. She knew this route like she knew her own name. Around 11:45 p.m., her truck's way station bypass transponder indicated she needed to pull into the upcoming facility for inspection. This was unusual. Her transponder usually gave her the green light to bypass, but not unheard of. Random inspections happened. Vicky took the off-ramp and followed the signs to the way station. The facility looked standard from the outside, a large building with multiple drive-through lanes, scales embedded in the pavement, signs directing trucks where to go. But something felt immediately wrong. The lights were on, but they had a strange quality, slightly too blue, casting harsh shadows. And there were no other trucks. On a major highway like 395, there should have been at least a few other vehicles going through inspection. But the facility was completely empty except for Vicky. She pulled onto the scale in lane 3 as directed by the signs. The digital display showed her weight, 83,240 pounds, well within legal limits. She waited for the light to tell her to proceed or pull aside for inspection. Instead, a voice came through a speaker she hadn't noticed. "Driver, proceed to inspection base 7 for detailed examination." Vicky frowned. Base 7? Standard way stations had maybe 3 or 4 bays. 7 suggested this was a much larger facility than it appeared from the outside. She followed the arrows to the inspection area and felt her confusion deepen. The building was impossibly large on the inside, a massive warehouse space with at least a dozen inspection bays, sophisticated equipment she'd never seen at any way station, and bright fluorescent lights that made everything look flat and surreal. Bay 7's door was open. Vicky backed her trailer in carefully, set her brake, and climbed down from her cab. An inspector appeared from an office, a woman in a standard-looking uniform, but something about her movements was off, too precise, like each gesture had been carefully calculated. "Good evening, Ms. Hammond," the inspector said, reading from a tablet. "We'll need to conduct a full inspection of your vehicle and cargo. This should take approximately 45 minutes. Please wait in the driver's lounge." She pointed to a door marked Waiting Area. "Do you need my logs and paperwork?" Vicky asked. "We already have them," the inspector said, which made no sense. Vicky hadn't transmitted anything. The waiting area was stranger still. It looked like a normal lounge. Chairs, vending machines, a TV mounted on the wall, magazines on a table. But everything felt wrong. The magazines were current issues from brands Vicky recognized, but when she picked one up and opened it, the articles inside were about events that hadn't happened yet. One article discussed the results of an election scheduled for 6 months in the future. Another described a natural disaster with a date 3 weeks ahead. Vicky's hands trembled as she put the magazine down. She tried the vending machine, thinking maybe a soda would calm her nerves. She inserted a dollar bill, pressed the button for a Coke, and watched as the can tumbled down. But when she retrieved it, the can was ice cold, colder than any refrigerated vending machine could produce, cold enough that frost formed on the aluminum immediately. The TV was on, showing what looked like a news broadcast. But the news was wrong. The anchors were discussing current events from different time periods, all mixed together. Something from 2015, then a 2023 story, then something Vicky remembered from 2008. The broadcast jumped between eras randomly, like someone was channel surfing through time. "What the hell is this place?" Vicky whispered to herself. She tried the door to leave, but it was locked. The handle turned, but the door wouldn't budge. She was trapped in this waiting room with magazines from the future and a TV broadcasting news from multiple timelines. Through a window, she could see the inspection bay where her truck was parked. The inspector was doing something to the trailer, using equipment that looked more like laboratory apparatus than inspection tools. She was taking samples of the cargo, but she was also taking samples of the trailer itself, scraping metal, collecting air from inside, measuring things with devices Vicky couldn't identify. 45 minutes passed according to the wall clock. Then an hour. 2 hours. Vicky pounded on the door, shouting for someone to let her out. No one came. She tried her cell phone. No signal, and the time displayed on it was wrong, flickering between different hours, sometimes even different dates. Finally, after what felt like 3 hours, but might have been longer or shorter, Vicky's sense of time had become completely unreliable. The door unlocked with a click. The same inspector stood outside. "Your vehicle has passed inspection, Ms. Hammond. You're free to go. Thank you for your cooperation." Passed? What were you inspecting? And why was I locked in there for 3 hours? The inspector tilted her head, and Vicky saw something flicker across her face. An expression that wasn't quite human. Too symmetrical, too controlled. 3 hours? The inspection lasted 42 minutes within the estimated time frame. Your perception of duration may have been affected by the facility's temporal field. This is normal and temporary. Temporal field? What are you talking about? What is this place? This is Way Station Facility 395 North, operated under Department of Transportation jurisdiction. All inspections are routine and legal. You may proceed to your destination. The inspector's voice had taken on a mechanical quality, like she was reading from a script. Vicky wanted to argue, to demand real answers, but the inspector had already turned away, walking back toward the office with that same too precise movement. Vicky climbed into her truck, noting that her cargo seals had been replaced with new ones, official DOT seals, but the serial numbers were strange, containing letters and numbers in a sequence she'd never seen on any legitimate seal. She started her engine and followed the exit signs out of the facility. As she pulled back onto Highway 395, she checked her clock. According to her truck's systems, only 45 minutes had passed since she'd entered the way station. But Vicky's watch, an old mechanical watch that didn't rely on any electronics, showed over 3 hours had elapsed. And her fuel gauge showed a quarter tank less than it should have, as if she'd been idling for much longer than 45 minutes. Vicky drove straight through to Reno, delivered her cargo, and then pulled into a truck stop to rest. She couldn't rest. Her mind was racing with questions. She searched online for Way Station 395 North California and found nothing. There was no facility at that location according to any official source. The California DOT website showed only 2 way stations on Highway 395, neither of them where Vicky had stopped. She called her dispatcher. "Tom, I need you to check something for me. Did you get any inspection report from a way station on 395 tonight?" "Negative, Vicky. Your transponder log shows you bypassed the normal stations. No stop recorded." "That's impossible. I was pulled in for inspection, spent almost an hour there." "Your transponder data shows continuous movement along 395. No stops except for when you reached Reno. You feeling okay?" Vicky ended the call, her hands shaking. Either her transponder was malfunctioning or the facility she'd stopped at didn't exist in any official record. She examined the new seals on her trailer. They looked genuine, but those serial numbers kept bothering her. She photographed them and sent the images to a friend who worked in DOT seal manufacturing. The response came an hour later. "Where did you get these? Those serial numbers aren't from any current production run. The format looks like our seals, but the prefix codes don't exist in our system. Could be counterfeits, but really high-quality ones." Over the following weeks, Vicky became obsessed with understanding what had happened. She drove Highway 395 multiple times looking for that way station, but it was never there. The location where she remembered pulling off was just empty desert. No structures, no roads. Not even old foundations or signs that anything had ever been built there. She found other drivers online who reported similar experiences, stopping at facilities that didn't appear in any records, undergoing inspections with equipment that seemed too advanced, losing time that their electronic logs didn't register. One driver claimed he'd stopped at a way station in Nevada and met inspectors who knew details about his life that weren't in any database. Another reported seeing vehicles in the inspection bays that looked like trucks from different eras, including designs that didn't exist yet. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. These phantom way stations appeared on remote highways, usually at night, usually to solo drivers with no witnesses. The inspections always involved unusual equipment and procedures, and the facilities always existed outside normal time. Either drivers experienced more time than their instruments recorded or vice versa. Some drivers reported entering a facility at night and exiting in daylight, with only minutes passed according to their clocks but their bodies feeling the exhaustion of hours. Vicky contacted a researcher who studied anomalous phenomena, a professor at a small university who took her story seriously. "What you're describing sounds like a temporal displacement," he explained. "Places where time flows differently, where the normal rules of causality are suspended. Some theories suggest certain government facilities might be experimenting with time manipulation, and they'd need isolated locations to do it. Remote highway way stations would be perfect. Infrastructure already in place, legal authority to stop and inspect vehicles, built-in excuse for delays." But why? What could they possibly gain from inspecting trucks in a time-displaced way station? Maybe they're not inspecting the trucks. Maybe they're inspecting the drivers. Testing how humans react to temporal fields. Collecting data on perception and memory during time dilation. Or maybe, he paused, considering, they're looking for something specific. Contraband that only exists in certain time frames, or tracking cargo that moves between temporal zones. It sounds like science fiction, but if the government has technology that can manipulate time, they'd need to monitor its effects on regular commerce and transportation. Vicky never got definitive answers. The way station never appeared again when she drove Highway 395, though she looked for it every time. But she noticed other things. Sometimes her delivery times would be off by hours in ways that made no sense. She'd arrive at destinations either earlier or later than possible given her documented route and speed. Other drivers started reporting similar temporal inconsistencies, always on remote highways, always when driving alone at night. And once, about 6 months after her experience, Vicky was going through her truck's maintenance records and found something impossible. According to the service logs, her truck had been inspected at a DOT facility on May 9, 2021 at 11:47 p.m. The inspection notes included details about her cargo, her equipment, and the condition of her vehicle. But the facility code listed was 395 NTF, which didn't correspond to any real location. And at the bottom of the report, in small print, was a single line. Subject exhibited expected temporal perception variance. Monitoring continues. Victoria Hammond retired from long-haul trucking in 2023, 2 years earlier than she'd planned. She took a job as a dispatcher, working from home, coordinating routes for other drivers but never driving those routes herself. She still warns newer drivers about weird experiences on remote highways, tells them to trust their instincts if something feels wrong at an inspection facility, and advises them to keep old-fashioned mechanical watches as backup timekeeping devices. Because Vicky knows now that the highway infrastructure includes more than just roads and bridges and normal way stations. There are other facilities operating in the spaces between seconds, conducting inspections that measure more than weight and cargo. And sometimes, late at night when she's alone, Vicky looks at that inspection report with the impossible facility code, and she wonders if she's still being monitored, if that night at the way station outside of time marked her somehow, tagged her in a database that tracks people who've glimpsed the temporal experiments hidden in America's transportation system. Story 3. The Children on the Roadside. Frank Morrison had been driving the same route through rural Mississippi for 22 years, Highway 49 from Jackson to Hattiesburg, delivering auto parts to dealerships along the way. He knew every town, every landmark, every peculiarity of that stretch of road. But on a humid August evening in 2020, Frank encountered something on that familiar highway that shattered his understanding of reality. and left him questioning whether some spirits are trapped in endless loops, playing out their final moments for any driver unfortunate enough to witness them. The date was August 14th, a Thursday. Frank had left Jackson around 6 p.m., planning to make his deliveries and be home by midnight. The heat had been oppressive all day, but as evening fell, a thunderstorm rolled in from the west, bringing torrential rain and lightning that turned the drive treacherous. Frank slowed to 45 miles per hour, his wipers struggling to keep up with the deluge. He was about 30 miles south of Jackson, in a particularly remote stretch where the highway cut through dense pine forest, when he saw them. 3 children standing on the shoulder of the road, soaking wet, facing the oncoming traffic. 2 girls and a boy, ages maybe 6 to 10 years old, wearing what looked like old-fashioned clothes, white and pale colors that almost seemed to glow in his headlights. Frank's first instinct was shock at seeing children out in this weather, at night, in the middle of nowhere. He slammed on his brakes, pulling onto the shoulder ahead of where they stood. He grabbed his jacket and jumped out, ready to help these kids who were clearly in serious trouble. But when he looked back toward where they'd been standing, they were gone. Just vanished. Frank ran back to the spot, rain hammering him, lightning illuminating the forest. "Hello, kids, where did you go?" Nothing, no response. No sign anyone had been there. The shoulder was gravel and mud. If 3 children had been standing there, there should have been footprints. There were none. Frank searched for 5 minutes, increasingly panicked, before climbing back into his truck. He grabbed his CB radio. "Breaker, breaker, this is Delta 1 on Highway 49 southbound, mile marker 73. I've got 3 missing children last seen on the roadside. I need emergency services here now." The response came from a state trooper. "Delta 1, can you describe the children?" Frank did. The 2 girls in white dresses, the boy in light-colored clothing, their ages, their apparent distress. There was a long pause before the trooper responded, and when he did, his voice had changed, becoming quieter, more serious. "Delta 1, stay in your vehicle. Do not attempt to locate these children. Do not leave your truck. I'm going to give you some information, and I need you to remain calm. The children you're describing match a report from 1983. 3 kids who died in a car accident at that exact location during a thunderstorm. Their names were Sarah, Michelle, and David Thornton. They appear on that stretch of road periodically, always during storms, always at night. You're not the first driver to report seeing them." Frank's blood ran cold. "You're telling me I saw ghosts?" "I'm telling you that you saw something that's been reported by dozens of drivers over the past 37 years. They appear, drivers stop to help, and the children vanish. Sometimes drivers report other phenomena after seeing them. I need you to tell me. Did you make physical contact with any of the children?" "No. They disappeared before I could reach them." "Good. Do not attempt to find them. Continue your route. If you experience any other unusual phenomena, call this in immediately." The trooper gave Frank a direct number, then signed off. Frank sat in his truck, hands shaking, rain drumming on the roof. Ghosts. He'd seen the ghosts of dead children. Part of him wanted to dismiss it, to rationalize what he'd witnessed, but the trooper's response had been too specific, too prepared. This was a known phenomenon. He pulled back onto the highway and continued south, driving slowly, his mind reeling. The storm began to break up, rain lessening to a drizzle, clouds parting to show stars. Frank was just beginning to calm down when he saw them again. The 3 children were standing in the middle of his lane, directly in his path, about 100 yards ahead. Frank shouted and slammed on his brakes, his trailer beginning to skid on the wet pavement. He fought for control, certain he was about to hit these kids, unable to stop in time. His truck passed right through them, no impact, no resistance, nothing. One moment they were there, the next they were gone like mist, and Frank's rig was sliding to a stop on the empty highway. He sat there, panting, heart racing so fast he thought he might have a heart attack. They'd been solid, real, detailed. He'd seen their faces, their wet hair plastered to their heads, the terror in their eyes. And he'd driven through them like they were projections. His CB radio crackled to life without anyone transmitting. Through the static, Frank heard voices, children's voices, distant and distorted. "Help us, please help. It's dark. We can't find Mommy. Please stop. Why won't anyone stop?" Frank grabbed the radio. "I stopped. I tried to help you. What do you want from me?" The voices continued, not responding to him, just repeating the same phrases over and over. It wasn't a conversation, it was a recording, an echo of words spoken long ago playing through his radio for reasons he couldn't comprehend. Then he saw headlights behind him. A car was approaching fast, too fast for the wet conditions. Frank watched in his mirror as the vehicle hydroplaned around a curve, the driver losing control. The car swerved wildly, and Frank realized with horror that it was heading straight for the spot where he'd first seen the children standing on the shoulder. Time seemed to slow. Frank watched the car leave the roadway, barrel down the embankment, and slam into a massive pine tree. The sound of the impact was horrific, metal crunching, glass shattering, the tree's trunk splitting. Then silence, broken only by the patter of light rain. Frank called 911, reporting the accident, then grabbed his first aid kit and ran to the wrecked vehicle. It was an older sedan, the front end crushed around the tree. The driver was unconscious but breathing, trapped by the crumpled dashboard. Frank did what he could, checked for bleeding, stabilized the driver's head, covered him with a blanket against the shock. Emergency vehicles arrived within 15 minutes. As the paramedics worked to extract the driver, a state trooper, the same one Frank had spoken with earlier based on the voice, approached him. "You're Delta 1, the driver who reported seeing the Thornton children?" "Yeah. They caused this accident. They appeared in the road, I nearly hit them, and then this car came around the curve too fast, trying to avoid." Frank stopped. The car hadn't been trying to avoid the children. The driver probably hadn't seen them at all. "Why are they here? What do they want?" The trooper looked at the accident scene, then at Frank. "The Thornton children died exactly here, August 14th, 1983. Car accident during a thunderstorm. Their mother was driving, lost control on the wet road, hit that same tree. Killed all 3 kids instantly. Mother survived. Every year on the anniversary, drivers report seeing the children. They appear on the roadside, walk into the road, cause near misses. And usually someone crashes at this exact spot like the original accident is replaying." "That's insane. Are you telling me ghosts cause real accidents?" "I'm telling you that on August 14th for the past 37 years, there's been at least one serious accident at mile marker 73. Sometimes fatalities. It happens every single year, always during or right after a storm. Whatever those children are, ghosts, echoes, some kind of temporal recording, they're connected to this location, and their presence seems to trigger accidents." Frank looked at the wreck, at the paramedics loading the unconscious driver into an ambulance. Is he going to make it? Probably. Injuries look serious but survivable. You called it in fast, got help here quickly. That saved his life. The trooper paused. "You know, most drivers who see the Thornton children panic, drive erratically, or stop in dangerous positions. You handled it well. Kept your vehicle controlled, didn't cause a secondary accident." "I saw them twice," Frank admitted. "Once on the shoulder, then in the middle of the road. I drove right through them. And I heard their voices on my CB asking for help." "The voices are the worst part," the trooper said quietly. "I've heard them myself 3 years ago when I responded to an accident here. Children crying for their mother, begging people to stop and help. It's an echo of their final moments, playing on repeat. The mother was injured in the original crash, couldn't help them, and they died calling for her. That's what we're hearing, their last words, recorded somehow in this location, broadcasting on frequencies they shouldn't be able to access. Frank spent another hour at the scene giving his statement, helping where he could. The injured driver was transported to a hospital in Hattiesburg. Frank learned later that the man survived with a broken leg, fractured ribs, and a serious concussion. But he would recover. He'd been lucky. The exact same type of accident in the exact same tree had killed 3 children 37 years earlier. Before Frank left, the trooper gave him a piece of advice. If you drive this route regularly, avoid this stretch on August 14th from now on. Take a different highway, detour around it, call in sick, whatever you need to do. The phenomenon seems to peak on the anniversary. Other times of year, drivers occasionally report seeing the children, but August 14th is when they're most active, most solid, most able to affect the physical world. We can't explain it, can't stop it, can only warn people. Frank took that advice seriously. He altered his route permanently, adding an hour to his delivery schedule but avoiding Highway 49 between Jackson and Hattiesburg. He convinced his dispatcher to assign that run to someone else, citing personal reasons without explaining the truth. But Frank did his own research. He found the original accident report from August 14, 1983, in newspaper archives. The Thornton family, Mother Elizabeth driving, children Sarah, 8, Michelle, 6, and David, 10, as passengers, had been traveling to visit relatives when the accident occurred. The article described the scene in heartbreaking detail. The children had survived the initial impact but died before help arrived, trapped in the wreckage, calling for their mother who was unconscious in the front seat. They died from internal injuries and exposure during the hour it took for someone to find them on that remote stretch of highway. Frank also found something else. He compiled reports of accidents at mile marker 73 on Highway 49 going back to 1983. There had been 37 accidents on August 14th over the 37 years since the Thornton children died. Exactly 1 per year, always on the anniversary. Some were minor, some serious, 3 were fatal. And in nearly every case, drivers reported seeing children on the roadside shortly before the accident occurred. It wasn't random, it wasn't coincidence. Something about that location, that date, and those 3 dead children created a phenomenon that repeated annually, endangering drivers and causing accidents that echoed the original tragedy. Frank couldn't explain the mechanism, whether it was supernatural, some kind of temporal anomaly, or a psychological effect that caused drivers to react dangerously. But the pattern was undeniable. Frank Morrison retired from trucking in 2022 at age 61, earlier than he'd planned. He took a job at a local auto parts store, working retail, never driving long routes again. But every August 14th, he monitors the news from Mississippi, checking for accident reports on Highway 49 near mile marker 73. And every year, without fail, there's at least one. He's tried contacting state authorities suggesting they close that stretch of highway on the anniversary date, but his suggestions go nowhere. How do you explain to bureaucrats that a road needs to be closed because ghosts cause accidents? How do you justify the expense and logistics based on a phenomenon that sounds like superstition? So the accidents continue. The Thornton children continue to appear, standing on the roadside in their pale clothes, walking into the path of oncoming vehicles, their voices calling for help through CB radios and emergency frequencies. And drivers continue to stop, or swerve, or panic, causing new accidents that feed the cycle. Frank still has nightmares about it, those small faces illuminated by his headlights, the terror in their eyes, the way they vanished when he tried to help. And he wonders if they know they're dead, if they understand they're trapped in an endless replay of their worst moment, or if they genuinely believe that each driver who sees them is a new chance for rescue that never comes. He hopes they don't know. He hopes they're not aware enough to understand that they've been dying over and over again for 37 years. Will probably continue for 37 more, trapped on that dark highway until something breaks the cycle, or the road itself ceases to exist. Story 4. The Cargo That Screamed. Russell Grant had been in the freight business for 41 years, and in that time he'd transported every conceivable type of cargo: livestock, machinery, hazardous materials, precious metals, even classified military equipment. At 63 years old, Russell thought he'd seen everything. Then came the job offer in March 2019, a seemingly straightforward haul from a medical research facility in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to a government installation outside Wichita, Kansas. The cargo manifest listed medical specimens, temperature-controlled, biohazard level 2, which seemed routine. Russell had transported similar materials dozens of times, but when his cargo began screaming at 3 a.m. on a deserted stretch of highway, Russell learned that some biological materials are more alive than shipping paperwork suggests. The pickup was scheduled for 6 p.m. at a nondescript building on the outskirts of Albuquerque. Russell arrived on time, backed his refrigerated trailer up to the loading dock, and waited while technicians in white coats loaded 6 large canisters into his trailer. The canisters were stainless steel, each about 4 feet tall and 2 feet in diameter, with biohazard markings and digital temperature displays. They were secured with excessive straps and padding, more than Russell had ever seen for similar shipments. A supervisor handed Russell the paperwork and a sealed envelope. "Instructions for the route," the man said. "Follow them exactly. Maintain temperature at precisely -20 Celsius. Do not open the trailer for any reason. Do not deviate from the prescribed route. If you experience any anomalies with the cargo, call this number immediately." He handed Russell a card with a phone number and nothing else. No name, no organization, just 10 digits. "What kind of anomalies?" Russell asked, but the supervisor had already turned away, heading back into the building without answering. Russell checked his refrigeration unit, locked at -20 as specified, and started the long drive northeast. The route instructions were oddly specific. Take Highway 40 east through Texas, no stops except for fuel at 3 designated stations, no overnight parking, no rest stops, continuous driving with only brief pauses. It was a punishing schedule for a solo driver, but the pay was triple his normal rate, so Russell didn't complain. The first 5 hours were uneventful. Russell crossed into Texas, fueled at the first designated station, and continued into the night. The panhandle stretched flat and empty around him, the road straight and hypnotic. His refrigeration unit hummed steadily, temperature holding at -20 degrees exactly. At 2:47 a.m., according to his dashboard clock, Russell heard the first sound. A thump from inside the trailer, muffled but distinct. Then another. He checked his monitoring system. Temperature stable, no alerts, trailer structurally sound. Another thump, harder this time. Russell tried to rationalize it. Cargo shifting, thermal expansion and contraction, perfectly normal. But then he heard something that made his blood freeze. A sound that was unmistakably a voice. Muffled, distorted by the trailer walls and the refrigeration noise, but definitely a voice. And it sounded like it was screaming. He grabbed his phone and called the number he'd been given. It rang 7 times before a woman's voice answered. "Incident line, go ahead. This is Russell Grant, driver for the Albuquerque to Wichita run. My cargo is making sounds, like screaming." "Define screaming, Mr. Grant." "I mean screaming, like a person in distress. What the hell am I transporting?" There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Mr. Grant, the cargo is biological specimens in suspended animation. What you're hearing is likely cavitation noises from the cryogenic fluid or the refrigeration system under stress. This is normal. Continue your route." "It doesn't sound like cavitation. It sounds like someone—" "Mr. Grant." The woman's voice became firmer. The specimens are not conscious. They cannot vocalize. What you're hearing is mechanical noise. Do not stop. Do not open the trailer. Continue your route. These instructions are for your safety as well as the cargo's security. Acknowledge. Russell wanted to argue, but something about the woman's tone made it clear that arguing was pointless. Acknowledged. Continuing route. He ended the call, but the sounds from the trailer intensified. Multiple voices now, overlapping, some screaming, some making sounds that didn't seem human. Clicks and whistles and low-frequency moans that Russell felt in his bones more than heard. And underneath it all, a rhythmic thumping, like multiple somethings beating against the interior walls of the trailer. Russell turned up his radio to drown out the sounds, but even at full volume he could hear them, feel them through the connection between his cab and trailer. Whatever was back there was alive, conscious, and in distress. The official explanation of suspended animation was clearly bullshit. These things were awake, active, and trying to get out. At 3:15 a.m., his refrigeration unit alarm blared. The temperature in the trailer was rising. -18, -15, -10. Russell immediately stopped and checked the unit. It was running at full capacity, compressor straining, but the temperature continued to climb. Whatever was inside the canisters was generating heat, overwhelming the cooling system. The screaming got louder. Russell could now hear distinct words through the cacophony, though the language was nothing he recognized. And then he heard English, fragmented, distorted, but understandable. "Let us out. Burning. Help. Help. Help." Russell ran back to his cab and grabbed his phone, calling that number again. "The temperature is failing. It's up to -5 and still climbing. The cargo is screaming in English. What the hell am I hauling?" "Mr. Grant, remain calm. The specimens are programmed with linguistic patterns. They're not conscious. They're responding to thermal stress with pre-programmed vocalizations designed to test emergency response systems. This is part of the research protocol." "That's insane. I hear people begging for help." "They're not people, Mr. Grant. The specimens were never people. They're biological constructs grown for research purposes. They have vocal capabilities but no consciousness, no awareness. Like a recording device that plays distress calls when triggered by temperature changes. Now, the temperature rise is concerning. We're rerouting emergency support to your location. What's your current mile marker?" Russell gave his location on Highway 40 in the Texas Panhandle. The woman confirmed that a support team would reach him within 90 minutes. "Maintain your position. Do not open the trailer under any circumstances. The specimens are not dangerous if contained, but exposure to ambient temperature will cause rapid cellular breakdown that releases toxic compounds. Stay in your cab, keep your windows closed, and wait for the team." The next 90 minutes were the longest of Russell's life. The temperature in the trailer climbed to +2 degrees Celsius before stabilizing, kept from rising further only by the overworked refrigeration unit. The screaming reached a crescendo around 3:45 a.m. Not just voices, but shrieks of what sounded like genuine agony mixed with that clicking and moaning that came from throats not shaped like human throats. And then Russell saw movement in his trailer camera feed. The canisters were opening, their lids lifting despite being supposedly sealed. What emerged was difficult to process, difficult to even look at. The shapes were roughly humanoid, but wrong. Too many limbs, skin that glistened and rippled like it was liquid. Faces that had too many features arranged in configurations that hurt to observe. 6 of them, one from each canister, pulling themselves upright, moving toward the trailer doors with jerky experimental movements like newborns learning to walk. Russell scrambled out of his cab and ran 50 yards from his truck, pulling out his phone to record what he was seeing. The trailer doors bulged outward, something hitting them from inside with tremendous force. Once, twice, 3 times. On the fourth impact, the doors burst open and the things spilled out onto the highway. They moved like spiders, using all their limbs to scramble across the asphalt. Their screaming had changed to something else, chittering, communicating with each other in that clicking language. In the red glow of Russell's taillights, they looked like something from a nightmare, biological impossibilities that should not have been able to exist. Then they began to break down. Their skin blistered and sloughed off, exposing muscle and internal structures. They screamed again, genuine pain in those sounds, and tried to crawl back toward the refrigerated trailer, seeking the cold they needed to survive. But the damage was done. Within minutes, they collapsed into pools of rapidly decomposing biomass, their screams fading to wet gurgles and then silence. Russell watched in horror as the 6 creatures dissolved into puddles of organic matter that steamed in the cold March air. The smell was indescribable, chemical and organic combined, like burning plastic mixed with rotting meat. He backed further away, gagging, his camera phone still recording the whole nightmare. Headlights appeared from both directions, multiple vehicles converging on his location with frightening speed. The promised support team arrived in black SUVs and a large containment truck. Personnel in full hazmat suits immediately went to work, spraying the remains with some kind of foam that seemed to accelerate the decomposition, turning the biomass into an ash-like substance that they swept up and sealed in containers. A man in a suit approached Russell. No hazmat protection, just an ordinary business suit. "Mr. Grant, I need your phone, please." "What? No. I recorded everything. This is proof." "Proof of what? That you were transporting biological research materials that deteriorated due to refrigeration failure?" "That's all this is, Mr. Grant, a transport accident. Unfortunate, but not extraordinary. Your phone, please. We'll compensate you for it." Russell knew he had no real choice. These people had authority beyond anything he could challenge. He handed over his phone. The man took it, removed the memory card, and dropped the card into a small device that flashed with light. Some kind of degausser that magnetically wiped the data. Then he handed the phone back, now useless except for making calls. "You'll be compensated for the lost cargo plus a substantial bonus for dealing with difficult circumstances. Your trailer will be decontaminated and returned to you. The refrigeration failure was not your fault. The specimens generated more thermal output than projected. But I need you to understand something very clearly, Mr. Grant. What you saw tonight was classified research. Biological constructs created for medical testing. They were never human, never conscious in any meaningful sense. The vocalizations were programmed responses, and speaking about this to anyone will result in severe legal consequences. Sign here." He produced a non-disclosure agreement with penalty clauses that included prison time and financial penalties that would bankrupt Russell and his family. Russell signed. What else could he do? The cleanup took 4 hours. By dawn, every trace of the incident had been removed. Russell's trailer was steam-cleaned and sanitized so thoroughly that it looked factory new inside. The support team vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. Russell was left alone on the side of Highway 40 with a clean trailer, a check for $75,000, and memories he was legally forbidden to discuss. Russell Grant completed 2 more deliveries that week, then quit the freight business entirely. He sold his truck, paid off his mortgage with the settlement money, and took a job at a hardware store where the heaviest thing he had to deal with was bags of concrete mix. He never hauled refrigerated cargo again, never accepted jobs that involved government facilities or classified materials, and he started having nightmares every night. Dreams of things with too many limbs screaming in a mixture of human and inhuman languages, dissolving into pools of organic matter that tried to reform themselves while crying out for help. He broke the NDA once, 10 months after the incident, telling his story to a journalist who specialized in government conspiracy theories. The journalist investigated, found nothing. No records of Russell's delivery, no facility in Albuquerque matching the description, no government installation outside Wichita that would acknowledge receiving biological specimens. It was like the entire event had been erased from reality. The journalist eventually published a watered-down version of the story on a conspiracy website where it gathered a few hundred views and was quickly forgotten among thousands of similar tales. Russell knows what he saw. He knows those things were alive, conscious, suffering. The official explanation, biological constructs, programmed responses not really aware, might have been technically true, but it didn't matter. They'd felt pain. They'd begged for help in human language. They'd tried to survive, and Russell had transported them to their deaths while being assured everything was normal and routine. He still drives sometimes, short local routes, deliveries around his hometown. But he never drives at night, never takes refrigerated loads, and he always checks what he's hauling. Because Russell Grant knows now that cargo manifests lie, that official paperwork covers up horrors, and that sometimes what you're transporting is closer to alive than dead, closer to human than specimen, and the screaming you hear through the walls is genuine suffering that someone somewhere decided was acceptable in the name of research. Story 5. The Endless Bridge. Martin Ochoa had been crossing the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel twice a week for 18 years, hauling seafood from Virginia Beach to Baltimore. The 23-mile crossing was his favorite part of the route, a marvel of engineering that combined bridges and underwater tunnels, offering stunning views of the bay when weather was clear. Martin knew that bridge like he knew his own home. Every lane change, every tunnel entrance, every support structure, which is why on the foggy November night of 2021, when the bridge became impossible, stretching far beyond its actual length and leading to places that didn't exist, Martin understood immediately that he'd driven into something that defied every law of physics and geography he knew. November 3rd started as a typical delivery day. Martin picked up his load of fresh seafood, crabs, oysters, and fish on ice, around 4 p.m. and began the drive north from Virginia Beach. The weather forecast had mentioned fog, but Martin had driven the bridge in fog dozens of times. By 7 p.m. he was approaching the bridge tunnel entrance, and the fog was indeed heavy, reducing visibility to maybe 100 feet. Not ideal, but manageable. Martin paid his toll and entered the first bridge section, his headlights cutting through the gray murk. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel consisted of multiple sections, bridges, man-made islands, and underwater tunnels, covering 23 miles total. Martin had driven it so many times that he could navigate by feel, knowing instinctively when he was approaching tunnel entrances or upcoming lane shifts. Except tonight, the familiar landmarks weren't appearing on schedule. Martin expected to reach the first tunnel, the Thimble Shoal Tunnel, about 7 miles into the crossing. He'd been driving for 15 minutes at 55 miles per hour, which should have put him right at the tunnel entrance. But he was still on the bridge section, fog-shrouded support structures passing by endlessly, the tunnel nowhere in sight. Martin checked his GPS. It showed him on the bridge tunnel progressing normally, but his odometer told a different story. He'd traveled 18 miles since entering the bridge, yet according to the GPS, he should have covered only 8. And still no tunnel, just more bridge, endless concrete spans disappearing into fog ahead and behind. "What the hell?" Martin muttered, slowing his truck to 45 miles per hour. He should have crossed the entire bridge tunnel by now. 23 miles at 55 miles per hour meant a crossing time of about 25 minutes. He'd been driving for 32 minutes and was still on bridge spans with no sign of tunnels, islands, or the far shore. He tried his CB radio. Breaker, breaker, this is Chesapeake Runner on the bridge tunnel northbound. Anyone else experiencing weird navigation issues? The bridge seems longer than usual. Static answered him, thick and heavy. No other drivers, no response. Martin tried his cell phone. No signal, which was unusual. The bridge tunnel had cell coverage, not great, but functional. Now he had nothing. The fog began to change. It became thicker, taking on a strange luminescence, like it was lit from within by some diffuse light source. Martin's headlights barely penetrated it now, and he slowed further to 35 miles per hour. The support structures passing by on either side looked wrong. Taller than they should be, painted colors he didn't remember, some with architectural details that didn't match the bridge's design. Then Martin saw something that made his stomach drop. A sign appeared in his headlights. Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, next exit 47 miles. 47 miles? The entire structure was only 23 miles long. This was impossible. Martin pulled over to the narrow shoulder, a dangerous move on the bridge, but he needed to stop and process what was happening. He climbed out of his cab, and the fog wrapped around him like something alive, cold and damp and moving in ways that had nothing to do with wind. The bay should have been visible below, dark water extending to the horizon. Instead, Martin saw nothing. The fog extended downward infinitely, and when he dropped a coin over the edge, he didn't hear it hit water. He listened for 30 seconds, hearing nothing. It was like the bridge was suspended over an endless void. Back in his truck, Martin tried to call 911, but his phone displayed a message he'd never seen before. Emergency services unavailable. Location not recognized. His GPS had frozen, the map display showing nothing but a blue line extending into white emptiness. Martin made a decision. He'd turn around, drive back to Virginia Beach, and figure out what was happening from solid land. He performed a careful U-turn on the bridge. Illegal and dangerous normally, but these weren't normal circumstances, and started driving back the way he'd come. 10 minutes of driving. 20 minutes. The support structures passed by, disappearing into fog behind him. 30 minutes. 45. Martin had driven at 45 miles per hour for 45 minutes, covering over 30 miles, and he was still on the bridge. He should have reached the Virginia Beach entrance long ago. But there was no entrance, no toll plaza, no land, just endless bridge extending in both directions into infinite fog. Martin was trapped. The bridge had become a loop, or it had stretched impossibly, or he'd driven into some alternate version that didn't follow normal geography. Whatever the explanation, he was stuck on a structure that should have been 23 miles long but now seemed to go on forever. He kept driving, alternating between panic and forced calm, trying to reason through what was happening. The bridge had to end somewhere. Structures had limits. But after 2 hours of continuous driving, consuming a quarter tank of fuel, Martin had to accept that normal rules weren't applying. He was on a bridge outside normal space, and driving wasn't going to find him an exit. Then he saw other vehicles. Ghost-like shapes in the fog, other trucks and cars parked on the shoulder ahead. Martin pulled over near them and approached the closest vehicle, a pickup truck with Virginia plates. The driver was an elderly man sitting in his cab, staring straight ahead with empty eyes. "Hey!" Martin knocked on the window. "Hey, are you okay?" The man didn't respond, didn't even blink. He just stared forward, unmoving. Martin tried the door, unlocked. He opened it and touched the man's shoulder. The man was cold, rigid, dead. How long had he been sitting here? Martin checked the other vehicles, finding similar scenes. A woman in a sedan, dead, hands still on the wheel. A young couple in an SUV, both gone, expressions of terror frozen on their faces. 5 vehicles, 7 bodies, all dead of unknown causes, all seemingly having stopped on this impossible bridge and simply expired. Martin ran back to his truck, his breath coming in panicked gasps. Whatever this place was, it killed people. He had to get out, had to find an exit before whatever claimed these other drivers claimed him too. He drove faster now, pushing his truck to 60 miles per hour despite the fog. Hours passed. His fuel gauge dropped to half, then a quarter. The fog never changed. The bridge never ended, and Martin began to feel the effects of exhaustion and stress, his vision blurring, his thoughts becoming scattered and strange. Was this how the others had died? Trapped until they simply gave up, until their minds and bodies couldn't sustain the stress anymore. Then he noticed something about the support structures. They were repeating. Every 17 structures, the pattern repeated exactly. Same architecture, same paint schemes, same minor damages and wear patterns. He was in a loop after all, driving the same section of bridge over and over, trapped in a repeating space. Martin stopped his truck and got out, examining the structure carefully. If this was a loop, there had to be a seam somewhere, a place where the reality bent back on itself. He walked along the shoulder, studying every detail. And then he found it. A shimmer in the air between two support structures, a place where the fog seemed to ripple like water, where perspective bent in ways that hurt to look at. This was the fold point, the place where the bridge looped back on itself. Martin approached it cautiously. The rippling intensified as he got closer, and he could feel a pressure in his ears, a sensation like rapid altitude changes. He reached out and his hand passed through the shimmer, and suddenly he could see through it like looking through a window. On the other side was normal space, the regular bridge, clear night sky with stars visible, the lights of Virginia Beach in the distance. Martin ran back to his truck, started the engine, and drove straight at the shimmer. For a moment there was resistance, like pushing through a membrane, a feeling of intense pressure and cold that made him scream. Then he was through, bursting out of the fog into clear night air, his truck's momentum carrying him forward onto the normal bridge. His GPS came back to life immediately, showing him exactly where he was. Northbound on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, approaching the first tunnel entrance. According to his dashboard clock, only 35 minutes had passed since he'd entered the bridge. But his fuel gauge showed he'd burned through 3/4 of a tank, and his odometer had logged over 180 miles of driving. Martin didn't stop. He completed the crossing, delivered his cargo in Baltimore in a daze, and then drove straight home. He called in sick for a week, telling his dispatcher he had the flu. During that week, he researched everything he could find about the bridge tunnel, accidents, anomalies, anything unusual. He found scattered reports of drivers experiencing lost time on the bridge, of GPS glitches and navigation anomalies, but nothing that matched his experience of the endless loop. But he did find something disturbing. News reports of vehicles found abandoned on the bridge tunnel, drivers missing or found dead with no clear cause. 5 cases over the past 3 years matching exactly the vehicles Martin had seen in the fog. The official explanations varied: medical emergencies, suicides, suspected foul play. But the pattern was there: people entering the bridge and never coming out, or coming out dead, their vehicles having somehow traveled impossible distances based on fuel consumption. Martin tried reporting his experience to authorities, but how do you explain that you got trapped in a loop on a bridge that stretched to infinity? They took his statement politely, noted his concern, and did nothing. He tried contacting researchers who studied anomalous phenomena, found a few who took him seriously but without proof, and his phone had been dead during the entire event, no recordings. There was little they could do beyond add his account to a collection of similar stories. Martin Ochoa still drives, but he never crosses the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel anymore. He takes land routes now, adding 3 hours to his delivery schedule, but avoiding that 23-mile crossing that might, under the right conditions, become 180 miles or more, stretching into impossible space and trapping drivers in a loop they can only escape through luck or determination to find the fold point before exhaustion and despair claim them like it claimed the others. And sometimes, on foggy November nights, Martin thinks about those vehicles still parked on the shoulder in that impossible space. Those drivers who didn't make it out, and he wonders if they're still there. If the loop preserves them in some kind of temporal stasis, waiting for someone to find them and bring them back to normal reality. He wonders if he should try to go back, to look for that shimmer again and rescue the dead. Though he knows that's probably impossible and certainly insane. Mostly, Martin just tries to forget. But the memory stays with him. The endless fog, the repeating structures, the feeling of being trapped in a space that had no exit. Driving forever on a bridge that bent back on itself in violation of every physical law. And he knows that somewhere in the space between Virginia and Maryland, there's a version of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel that exists outside normal geography. A loop that catches the occasional driver and either releases them or keeps them forever, adding their vehicle to the collection of abandoned cars and dead travelers who made the mistake of entering at the wrong moment, when the fog was thick and reality was thin and the bridge became a trap from which most people never escape. Story 6. The Truck Stop That Feeds on Hope. Angela Martinez had been a long-haul driver for 33 years, crisscrossing America's highways with a competence and endurance that had earned her a reputation as one of the most reliable drivers in the industry. At 58 years old, she'd seen every kind of truck stop, from gleaming modern facilities with restaurants and showers to barely functioning rural stations with one pump and a vending machine. But the truck stop she encountered on Interstate 70 in eastern Utah on a freezing January night in 2023 was unlike any place she'd ever been, and what she discovered there convinced her that some locations don't just serve travelers. They consume them in ways that leave no physical trace but hollow out everything that makes a person want to keep living. The date was January 22nd, and Angela was hauling furniture from Los Angeles to Denver, running 2 hours behind schedule due to weather delays in California. By 11 p.m., she was crossing Utah, fighting fatigue and desperately needing rest. Her next planned stop was Green River, still 90 miles ahead, but she wasn't sure she could make it without a short break. That's when she saw the sign. Last chance truck stop. Exit now. Food, fuel, rest. The exit number wasn't listed, and Angela didn't remember this stop from her previous runs on I-70, but maybe it was new. She took the exit, following a dark road that curved away from the interstate into empty desert. The truck stop appeared after 2 miles. A large facility with multiple fuel islands, a brightly lit building, and a parking lot that could accommodate 50 trucks. But only 3 other trucks were parked there, which was odd for such a large facility on a major interstate route. Angela pulled up to a fuel pump, climbed down, and started filling her tank. The cold was intense, well below freezing, and the wind cut like knives. Angela hurried through the fueling process and headed inside to pay and grab coffee. The building was warm, well lit, and equipped like a standard truck stop. Convenience store, fast food counter, trucker's lounge, showers, all the usual amenities. But something felt wrong immediately. The lighting was too bright, harsh, and clinical, making everything look slightly washed out and unreal. And there were no employees visible anywhere. "Hello?" Angela called out. No response. She walked through the store, past aisles of snacks and supplies, past the food counter where burgers sat under heat lamps, but no one worked the register. "Is anyone working here?" A voice came from behind her, startling her. "They're always working here. You just can't see them." Angela spun around to see a driver, a man in his 40s wearing a flannel jacket with deep circles under his eyes and an expression of profound weariness. "You're new here? First time at Last Chance?" "Yeah, saw the sign off I-70. Is this place open or what? I need to pay for fuel." The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. Don't worry about payment. They'll take what they're owed eventually. You here for rest? To sleep? Just a quick break, then I'm back on the road. That's what I said. What we all said. But it's been 3 days for me. I keep trying to leave, keep getting back in my truck, and somehow I end up back here within an hour. This place doesn't let you go easily. Angela felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold outside. What are you talking about? You can't leave? I can leave. I do leave. I drive away, get back on I-70, make it maybe 20 or 30 miles. Then I blink, and I'm back here, parked in the lot like I never left. It's like the road loops back no matter which direction I go. He gestured to a table where 2 other drivers sat, both looking similarly exhausted and hollow-eyed. Ask them. They've been here longer than me. One guy says he's been trying to leave for 2 weeks. Angela backed toward the door. I'm not staying. I'm leaving right now. Good luck, the man said. Maybe you'll make it. Some people do, I think. But most of us, we're stuck. And the longer you stay, the harder it gets to leave, because this place does something to you. It drains something. Hope, maybe. Willpower. Whatever it is that makes you want to keep going. Every hour here, you feel more tired, more defeated, more like just giving up and accepting that you'll be here forever. Angela ran to her truck, jumped in, and started the engine. She pulled out of the parking lot and drove back toward the interstate, her heart pounding. The road back seemed longer than she remembered, winding through dark desert for what felt like 10 miles before finally reaching I-70. She merged eastbound, pushing her truck to 75 miles per hour, desperate to put distance between herself and that place. 30 miles later, according to her odometer, Angela blinked. When her eyes opened, she was parked back at Last Chance truck stop, her engine idling, sitting in the exact same parking space she'd left. No time seemed to have passed. Her clock still showed 11:47 p.m., the same time it had been when she'd fled. No, Angela whispered. No, this isn't happening. She tried again, and again. Each time she'd drive away, make it some distance down the highway, 20 miles, 40 miles, once she made it almost 50. And then there would be a moment of discontinuity, a blink or a blank second, and she'd be back in the parking lot, back at the truck stop, back at Last Chance. After the 5th attempt, Angela accepted that she was trapped. She went back inside, found the 3 drivers still sitting at their table, and joined them. They introduced themselves: Marcus, who'd been there 3 days, Linda, there for 8 days, and Thomas, who claimed 14 days. Though he wasn't certain anymore because time felt wrong in this place. What is this? Angela asked. Some kind of quantum loop? A haunted location? We don't know, Linda said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. We've tried everything. Different routes away from here, driving in groups, leaving our trucks and trying to hitchhike. Nothing works. The road always loops back. And the longer we're here, the less we care about escaping. That's the worst part. I can feel it draining me. At first I was terrified, desperate to get out. Now I'm just tired. So tired. Part of me wants to just accept it, stop fighting, stay here forever. Thomas nodded. It feeds on us somehow, on our will to leave, our determination, our hope. Every hour here you feel more defeated, more hollow. I've watched drivers give up completely. They stop trying to leave, just sit here, staring at nothing. Eventually they fade. Fade? Angela asked. Well, what do you mean, fade? Literally fade. Become transparent, like ghosts, and then they're gone, disappeared. I've seen it happen to 4 drivers since I've been here. They lose all will to leave, accept that this is their life now, and then they start to fade over the course of a day until there's nothing left. The truck stop consumes them completely. Angela felt sick. This place was a trap, something that caught drivers and slowly drained their life force or spirit or whatever you wanted to call the thing that kept a person motivated and alive. And the mechanism was insidious, not physical restraint but psychological erosion, wearing down the desire to escape until the victim accepted captivity and was absorbed. "There has to be a way out," Angela said. "Some trick, some method that works." "If there is, we haven't found it," Marcus said. "But you're welcome to try. You're still fresh, still have fight in you. Maybe that makes a difference." Angela spent the next several hours exploring every possibility. She tried walking away from the truck stop on foot. After 2 miles in the freezing darkness, she blinked and was back inside the building. She tried smashing windows, setting off fire alarms, anything to trigger some kind of emergency response or outside intervention. Nothing worked. The building was indestructible and no help came. She examined the other drivers' trucks, looking for clues. All the vehicles were ordinary rigs. Nothing unusual, though she noticed that they were all running low on fuel. Her own tank, which she'd filled, was down to a quarter. The place was draining fuel too, keeping the trucks functional enough to attempt escape but never enough to get far. Then Angela had an idea. Every trap had a purpose, a reason for existing. This place fed on hope and determination, consuming the psychological energy of trapped drivers. What if the way to escape wasn't to fight or flee, but to offer it something else? What if she could satisfy whatever hunger animated this place? She gathered the other drivers and explained her theory. "This thing feeds on our desperation to leave. So what if we stop giving it that? What if we collectively decide we don't care about leaving, that we accept being here but in a way that's genuine, not defeated? Not giving up but genuinely accepting it as a choice?" "That's insane," Thomas said. "Acceptance is what leads to fading." "No, defeat leads to fading. There's a difference. Defeat is passive, hopeless. Acceptance can be active, a choice made from strength. What if we choose to stay, really commit to it mentally, and in doing so, starve this place by not feeding it our desperation?" They were skeptical, but also out of options. The 4 drivers made a pact. For the next 24 hours, they would genuinely accept being at Last Chance Truck Stop. They'd stop trying to leave, stop thinking about escape, stop feeding the place their fear and desperation. They'd exist here peacefully, as if they'd chosen this location as a permanent home. It was one of the hardest things Angela had ever done, to quiet the screaming voice in her head that demanded she keep fighting, keep trying to escape. But she committed fully. She ate the food under the heat lamps, slept in her truck without nightmares about being trapped, and spent time with the other drivers in calm conversation. Not about escape, but about their lives, their families, their memories. 12 hours into the pact, Angela noticed the lights in the building had changed. They were less harsh, more natural. 18 hours in, she felt different, less drained, more energized, like whatever had been siphoning her strength had stopped. 24 hours in, she walked outside and noticed the fence around the parking lot that had been subtly present the whole time was gone. Just gone. No evidence it had ever existed. "I think it's working," she told the others. "I think we're starving it by not feeding it our desperation." They all climbed into their trucks and tried leaving again. This time there was no loop. Angela drove back to I-70, merged eastbound, and kept driving. 10 miles, 20, 50, 100. No blink, no discontinuity, no return to the truck stop. She was free. She called the others on CB radio. Marcus had made it out too. Linda confirmed she was clear of the area, but Thomas didn't respond. Angela feared he'd been there too long, that he'd faded despite their efforts. She'd never know for sure. Angela completed her delivery to Denver, then took a month off. During that time, she researched everything she could find about Interstate 70 in Utah. looking for other reports of last chance truck stop. She found nothing in official records, no business license, no history, no evidence the place existed in normal reality. But she found scattered online accounts from drivers who mentioned getting trapped at truck stops that looped them back no matter how far they drove, places that drained their will to continue until they barely remembered why they'd wanted to leave. The phenomenon had different names: hope traps, despair loops, consumption stations, but the pattern was consistent. Facilities that appeared normal but existed outside normal space-time, trapping travelers and feeding on their psychological energy until they either escaped through some trick of mindset or faded completely, consumed by whatever animated these impossible places. Angela Martinez still drives long-haul routes, but she's more selective now about where she stops. She avoids facilities that seem too convenient, truck stops that appear in locations she doesn't remember from previous trips, exits that aren't clearly marked with standard highway numbers. And she's developed a mental discipline, a practice of maintaining calm acceptance rather than desperate striving, because she knows now that some places feed on desperation, and the only way to escape them is to stop giving them what they hunger for. She never saw a last chance truck stop again, never found that exit off I-70. But Angela knows it's still there, waiting for the next tired driver who needs rest and makes the mistake of taking an exit that leads to a place designed to keep them forever, slowly draining away their hope and will until there's nothing left but an empty truck in a parking lot and no sign of the driver who'd been fighting so hard to get back on the road and complete their journey home. Story 7. The Voice from the CB. Nathan Reed had been hauling coast-to-coast freight for 27 years, and in all that time his CB radio had been his constant companion, a link to other drivers, a source of road information and casual conversation that made the lonely miles pass more quickly. Nathan had heard every kind of CB chatter imaginable: truckers sharing weather updates and traffic warnings, night conversations that ranged from philosophical to profane, occasional pranks and harassment, even a few emergencies where the CB network coordinated rescue efforts. But on a clear October night in 2022, while crossing the empty expanses of West Texas on Interstate 10, Nathan's CB picked up a transmission that should have been impossible. A voice calling for help from a driver who'd been dead for 38 years. And the longer Nathan listened, the more he became convinced that some frequencies carry signals from places where time has no meaning, and the past bleeds through into the present, broadcasting desperate messages that no one can help with but everyone can hear. October 9th, 2022 started as an unremarkable day. Nathan picked up a load of electronics in Phoenix, Arizona, heading for Houston, Texas, a straight shot east on I-10 through some of the most desolate terrain in the country. By 9 p.m., he was deep in West Texas, that empty stretch between El Paso and Fort Stockton where civilization consisted of scattered ranches and the occasional tiny town where the highway ran straight for dozens of miles and the only company was the occasional truck or passenger vehicle passing in the darkness. Nathan's CB radio had been quiet for hours, so when it crackled to life around 10:47 p.m., he was grateful for the company. But the voice that came through wasn't like normal CB chatter. It was distorted, stretched out, with a quality that reminded Nathan of old recordings played at the wrong speed. Breaker, this is red line on I-10, westbound near mile marker 187. I've got a situation here. My trailer's, it's disconnected, jackknifed. I can't request assistance. I can't. The transmission broke up into static, then continued. It's so cold. Why is it so cold? And I can see them coming. Why are there so many lights? Request emergency assistance. Red line, mile marker 187, westbound. Nathan grabbed his CB microphone. Red line, this is Longshot on I-10 eastbound. I copy your distress call. What's your situation? Are you injured? Static answered him. Then the voice came back, ignoring Nathan's questions, continuing its original message, like a loop. Breaker, breaker. This is Red Line, on I-10 westbound, near mile marker 187. The same message, word for word, with the same pauses and distortions. Nathan realized he wasn't hearing a live transmission. He was hearing a recording, something broadcast.